otherwise, like, sweet. Okay. Yes, got it. We do record these. We post them on private YouTube links. So like they're up there. You don't need a password or anything, but you do need the link. We send the links out to people who are members of the group who may not have made it tonight, or like RSVP'd and then last minute, who knows what happened. We're on their way over there and got stuck behind the 500 cops on motorcycles. Did anybody see that on the way? Like,
I did see that.
Anybody know what?
It's cop week, the National Law Enforcement Memorial. So
Gotcha.
all these visitors, I mean, they have ceremonies. All these police from all over the U.S. and world actually.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. So National Law Enforcement Week, and there's like a National Law Enforcement Memorial.
Yeah, DC.
Okay. Well, today I learned. Thank you very much.
But they all get escorts from wherever the visiting ones get all.
Oh, gotcha. So like the ones, right. We saw like a couple busloads of people. That's probably what that is. Awesome. Okay. So once we kick things off in just a minute here, I'll probably step out and see if there's other people coming in. If you're just coming in, please see Christine at the back to show your vaccination card.
Hi, Christine.
Yes. Greg, for those of you who are in the room, please keep side conversations to a minimum. Restrooms are, where are restrooms, Brian?
Down to the right. Down this hall to the right.
Down this hall to the right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Restrooms are there. We'll go over community guidelines in just a second, but if you've been to any of our meetups, you'll be familiar with that already. There's the Wi-Fi info, 2611 guest 5G, password 2611 guest with a capital G. Drinks are in the fridge. Did everybody find drinks? Sweet. It's like around the corner. There's drinks, there's ice.
Cappuccino machine is there.
Oh, cappuccino machine is working. And there's ice. If you fancy a nice cappuccino at like 6 p.m., I mean, you do you.
I should have done the ice. I drink the cappuccino and split.
Also, there is like way too much pizza. Hopefully more people show up. Like, prepare yourself now for taking pizza home. You will be more than welcome. Awesome. Community guidelines, you can review those online. Those are linked from there, and basic, but like, just be cool, right? Like, treat everybody else like a, human adult person that you would like, how you would like to be treated. No harassment, hate speech, discrimination, blah, 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 blah. Awesome. Let's remember that we are here for learning and for sharing more than anything else. We are all about like, we're all doing stuff, cloud is new. We're all learning stuff as we go. Yeah, by the way, it's a really warm in here, so. Cool. Quick shout outs to our sponsors. Thank yous to them. So Matrix Group International, Brian, is Brian here? Brian must have stepped out to look for people. You've probably seen Brian kind of circulating. He was the guy directing people around, Brian. And on the line, we've got Joanna and Maki from Matrix Group International. Thank you so much to them, yay, for hosting us here tonight. They are a digital marketing and consulting agency. They spoke earlier this year about one of the first things they had to do when the pandemic set in, and they launched an online meeting service on AWS in like 90 days, like really, really rapid, banged it out. They shared some really great stuff about their architecture and stuff they're doing. I know they're always hiring, so if you're looking and, kind of marketing consulting agency is your vibe, definitely hit up Matrix Group. As you can see, they have cool offices. Also, a big shout out to Rapid7. James is here from Rapid7, I think.
I didn't know we sponsored it until I got here. So
yeah. All right. Well, you're here on behalf of Rapid7, yes, supposedly. Yeah. But yeah, so Rapid7, like broad range of cybersecurity products, everything from vulnerability management, SIM, SOAR, cloud security, Kubernetes, etc. Anything else you want to call out?
Yeah, that's good. Perfect.
Cool. Awesome.
You're still doing it. You still got it.
My former employer, I will say, by the way. Also, a shout out to Orca Security, who is here tonight. We'll be hearing more about them. You can read that whole thing, agentless cloud security platform. That's a little bit of a mouthful, but it is there. And you are going to be hearing a lot more about them, so I won't take time to dwell on that. Okay, agenda. So welcome and opening. That's what we've just been doing. It may have gone longer than 3 minutes. I apologize. Thank you to our sponsors. We just hit that. Shout out. So we've got, we won't use the full 15 for that. Community events, upcoming events. Anybody hosting anything, know of anything they want to share? Got anything?
Do you want to announce that now?
Yes, let's announce that now.
Sure. On August 11th, many of the community members right here, Aaron and myself and DevOps Days, DCs coming along as well in
What's the
September.
date?
September 16th to 17th for DevOps Days DC. We are in person, back in the location we were at last year, at the Ronald Reagan ITC building.
Cool. All right. So August 11th, AWS Community Day at the GMU Arlington campus, and then DevOps Days, September, you said
16th and 17th.
16th and 17th at the Ronald Reagan ITC building. Cool. So that's upcoming stuff to keep on your radar. Anybody hiring? Go for it.
I'm Dennis Wasilek. I'm with the Library of Congress's Office of Chief Information Officer. We are hiring 2 cloud admins. The position closes today. So if you want to be a federal employee after this, come see me and it'll apply.
No time pressure or
No time
anything.
pressure.
No, none, clearly. Okay. Anybody else hiring? Orca, you guys hiring? Route 7?
Always.
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 Any particular roles you want to advertise?
Customer success,
Customer success, sales engineers,
sales engineers,
BDRs,
yeah, BDRs.
and then engineering talent, of course.
Okay.
We can always use engineering.
Like pretty much, if you have some technical skills and you know cloud, it sounds like there's at least something that they would want to talk to you about. Cool. Cool.
Yep.
Jen.
Yeah, I'm with CloudForce. I'm with CloudForce, and we're always hiring for cloud engineers. If you're interested, our name is CloudForce, one word.
CloudForce, one word. Cloudforce.com.net.
Well, it's actually gocloudforce.com. if
Okay.
you're looking us up that way.
All
And
right.
We're based in the National Harbor, so.
Okay. So you can gamble. I mean, you can enjoy the area. Very cool. Cool. Anyone else? Last call for hiring. Anybody looking? All right, cool. Resources programs, training programs. For those that are like AWS community heroes or anything like that, I hear rumor that there's like some training, some certification credits that are circulating, but I don't know more than that. So, okay, cool. We don't have a startup pitch for tonight. Just a reminder, if anybody here is working on a startup and you ever want to just get a chance to pitch in front of the audience, just drop me a note, let me know. Try to reserve 15 minutes every month for that. We have not had takers so far this year, which is like a bummer. So come on, people. All right. Well, without further ado, then let us get to our. Whoops! How did I totally just lose that? Did I just lose that? Okay, there we go. Let us get to our first speaker, and that is Zac Wilson, MBA-CISSP, Senior Security Engineer, excuse me, at Orca Security. And obviously Zac is up here, and I don't have your full word memorized.
It's all right.
All right,
Don't worry about it.
all right. And you've taken over the share, so we.
Well, I need to share.
Okay.
I will share.
I stopped sharing, and I will get out of the way and grab some.
Okay. Do these controls drive anybody else crazy? These floating controls? They really just drive me nuts. All right, let's see here. Okay, well, we'll just wing it. All right. So hi, guys, I'm Zac Wilson, cloud security. I work for Orca Security. We're a cloud security company. We provide agentless cloud security to GCP, AWS, of course, Azure customers that are looking to move their infrastructure to the cloud. We do it kind of, like I said, we're agentless, which means we run no packets over your network, no IOPS in your storage stack, no compute resources of yours are being used. So that gives us the ability to really dig deep into these cloud workloads when you usually can't because performance impacts and things like that. So, that's just a really quick elevator pitch. And let me just see. I apologize. So I have corked this up. Okay, so this thing gonna move. Okay, here we go. So, you know, on the onslaught of, you know, when the cloud came out, I worked at Seagate Technology in 2007, and we dumped Lotus Notes and went to Gmail and GDocs and all that stuff. And, you know, it was, hey, move everything to the cloud. It's resilient, it's secure. And what they meant by secure, they meant resilient, right? It was durable, but it wasn't necessarily secure. And people really did not understand that. So, you know, what happened was you had a whole lot of unsuspecting cloud engineers that were told to move their infrastructure to the cloud. And then all of a sudden they're faced with a dumpster fire of, you know, these happy accidents, right? You've got all of these different components in the cloud: identity and access management, serverless components, Kubernetes, containers, access keys, tokens, all these different things, all of this complexity, right? And that complexity is really one of the root vulnerabilities. And I love this picture, and it's so true. You know, we typically, when we are standing up an infrastructure in cloud, we find ourselves not really knowing what's going on sometimes. And we try to take the path of least resistance, and that is usually wide open. So that leads to a lot of trouble. But the reason we do that is because all of this is so complex, right? Different terminologies, different implementations. Shared responsibilities differ from service to cloud to cloud. So you really got to understand what level that you have to, or you're responsible for as a customer, and what the cloud service provider is really providing you. Because a lot of people, I think, have a misconception about what they are providing. A bunch of different configurations, lots of accounts, authentication types. And, you know, one thing, a single click in the cloud can have a very dramatic effect, right? If you blow away the wrong Terraform template or whatever, you can really have you can quickly have drastic consequences in your cloud environment. A little behind. Now, all right, now, why should we care about cloud security? And these are some of the reasons why you should. Ransomware attacks are on the rise, right? They figured out that, you know, it's easier to make money extorting people and just, you know, encrypting their secrets or, you know, hiding them from them, than it is to spend all that time in a network doing all that reconnaissance, all that lateral movement. You know, it's just let's encrypt their stuff, let's extort them now. And so because of that, dwell times, which are down here in the right corner, those have gone down, right? So dwell time used to be about 280 something days, right? That's the time between when the exploit happens and they enter your network to the time we discover and eradicate them. So the dwell time has really gone down, but the only reason it's gone down is because ransomware attacks are up. Does that make sense to people? I mean, no doubt, you know, we know they're there. They just encrypted all our stuff. So, you know, the next thing that's why we should care is really the user is the new perimeter, and the identity and you know, and access management is the new firewall, right? Does that make sense? You guys copying there? The user is the new perimeter, and the identity is the new firewall in this new cloud world. And a lot of people don't understand that. You know, they're really good at configuring their WAFs and their firewalls to protect their perimeters. But how do I configure my identities and my roles and my groups and my security groups? How do I configure those right? Much more complex, particularly if it's new. Security misconfigurations are prevalent, right? Happens all the time. I work with a company called Capital One. You guys might have heard of them. And so, yeah, so, you know, we had an issue and everybody heard about it. And similarly, data breaches and, compliance findings are very expensive. I think I saw that Google and YouTube were sued $170 million by the FTC for violating children's privacy laws. So that's pretty expensive. And the FTC is also, as you guys probably are aware, being in Washington, are really starting to ramp up their investigations after breaches and make sure that the companies are following, smart and reasonable processes. All right. So what are some of the causes for these cloud misconfigurations? So this is data that we compiled. Most of this data is from looking at Orca's back end and looking at our environments. We also took some of this stuff from interviews and from some various trade studies that we pulled up. But really the number one reason why we have these misconfigurations is we're moving to the cloud so fast, people don't really know what they're doing. They're given a lot of responsibility. They're put under a lot of pressure, and they just need to get the thing up and running. And they don't care if it's secure or not in most cases. So the next problem is it's very difficult. So as we moved into the cloud, all of our tools were kind of ported into the cloud, but not really. And so we really had unified data, or not siloed data models, siloed use cases, siloed consoles. Maybe they worked, maybe they didn't. And so it really caused this lack of visibility because you had all of the signal that wasn't stitched together.
I have a question on that slide. Did you notice any variance in the different cloud providers? Different one from AWS versus
Well, it's skewed because AWS has the preponderance of the market, right? But
okay, so it's mostly AWS.
yeah, that's what I would say, because just as the market, it's like, why is Microsoft the biggest target, right? Speed of deployment, right? Time to market constraints, we talked about that. Default account configurations and misconfigurations on settings and other things, out of compliance issues. Now, why is this difficult? I just covered some of this. And here's a quote from CISA, and it says basically, despite having all of these security tools in place, organizations typically have weak cyber hygiene practices that allow threat actors to be successful. So we've spent all this money. Why can't we make it dim? Why can't we secure our systems? And here are the reasons, right? We just talked about cloud adoption is rising fast. Shared responsibilities are not understood. Misconfigured S3 buckets and neglected assets, right? These are all just reasons that it is difficult to secure the cloud. So what are attackers looking for, right? So they're going to try to establish initial access through either discovered keys. They're going to brute force into a system. They're going to, use keys that they had at a previous employer or something like that. But typically in the cloud, what they want to do is they have four aims that they're trying to achieve. First one is they want to maybe set up a crypto mining shop in your compute stack. Next one, they want to launch a ransomware attack so that they can do the next one, which is exfiltrate your data or remove your data, which would essentially be a denial of service attack against your bucket. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but I would encourage you to kind of familiarize yourself with it. I won't belabor it too much, but there is a infrastructure as a service MITRE attack framework. And it really will give you a good idea of all of the critical categories and all of the techniques that the attackers are using when they're attacking these cloud infrastructures. And of course, an important one is also the Linux attack matrix, because we know Linux is mostly used in our workloads. Again, so this is the outcome is typically bad news for whatever organization that is, right? Here we'll get into some other, so this is probably some more interesting facts. So some of the common high risk misconfiguration issues that we see in our environment are, number one, vulnerable images being pulled from GitHub or other repositories. I see it on a weekly basis almost. It's kind of scary. The next one is people will give EC2 instances some role or privileges that gives them full access to EC2 or the whole EC2 environment or other admin privileges to give them, carte blanche access. Next, we see that people have security groups and network access rules that allow direct access for RDP and SSH in from 0.0.0.0. So anywhere on the internet, we're allowing SSH and RDP access. In very few cases is that legitimate. Privilege roles that can be assumed by anyone. Again, if you are, you have a vulnerable EC2 that's sitting out there that is attacked and is exploited and compromised, then the attacker will assume the role of that EC2. As we go through some other interesting ones, we see that oftentimes we see that roles are attached to either with an instance profile or some other kind of role, and they'll attach the same role with the same privileges to 50 different machines, even though those 50 different machines may have 30 different use cases, right? But they just throw the same role and security groups on them and just let it ride. And so it's really a matter of not implementing that principle of least privilege and creating those roles that are specific for those systems. And then insecure private keys and along with the open SSH, they allow user password authentication on the edge. That's kind of interesting. So if we zero down specifically into IAM misconfigurations, and I think there's a couple of redundant ones here, but so like the number one IAM misconfiguration is having these EC2s with full access and admin privileges to EC2s, S3s, and then everything else. And also, again, roles and policies not enforcing that principle of least privilege, right? I see it all the time. More than 50%, I would say easily, more than 50% of the roles that I see in organizations are using less than half of the permissions they've been granted. There is a huge opportunity and a huge that companies could they could really reduce that attack surface and that blast radius if they would just really hone in on those roles and policies for their assets. Another one we see a lot of is people who are unknowingly or unwittingly storing PII unencrypted in buckets, right? Putting them on the edge, putting them on the internet. Next, we have, of course, privileged roles with cross-account trust, right? That don't have MFA or external ID enabled, and that these are extra levels of protection, so you can ensure that the client is who, or the trust is who they say they are. Next, we have IAM roles that are inactive that have admin privileges. So we will go in and, like I said, either they won't be using all of their permissions or they won't be used at all. And so again, that's just the giving an attacker an opportunity to elevate privilege. Inactive users is a big thing. And MFA on root, right? Anybody with admin access, I really think, or console access, I really think that MFA should be a minimal requirement for that. Now, if we look at the workloads, right? Neglected and vulnerable workloads. So 80% of the organizations we see have frontline on the edge servers with unpatched or unsupported OSs, right? And so that is really what the attackers look for. The attackers aren't looking to go after your crown jewel on the edge. They'll not give up if they can't find it on the edge. What they're looking for is that low-hanging fruit to give them a foothold in the environment. We also see that this is interesting. A few companies have workloads that are available like SSH, RDP access, but there are leaked passwords. Like we find a password in a breach dump, but yet they have it on their system. Lateral wrist movements. So, almost half of the external assets we see, or the internet facing workloads we see, they have secrets or credentials on them that are insecure, right? And so again, it's about as soon as that endpoint is, or that internet facing workload is compromised, they'll be able to discover those secrets and move laterally throughout the environment. And then of course, once they're inside the gates, 70% of the companies, a large portion of their internal systems are unpatched and unsupported. So lots of a really ripe target area for the attacker. Okay, and so here's some honorable mentions, right? S3 buckets that are public and people don't know about it. Lambda functions, I see this all the time. So either web app functions or Lambda functions, people like to hard code their secrets in these things, right? They should be using the secret manager for AWS. And even though it is encrypted on disk and it's encrypted over TLS and over the network, if that JSON file that underpins that Lambda file or that configuration, that script gets dumped, whoever has that now has your passwords in clear text. So I would encourage you guys to really pay attention to not exposing those variables in clear text and thinking, oh, well, this is encrypted on disk. There's no risk. Well, if it gets discovered and exfiltrated, yeah, there is. This is another one that's still around. Route 53 records pointing to invalid resources, right? When I was at Capital One, this was really hot. So there would be orphaned domains that a company would own. And so the attackers would just basically stand up their own resources with those and point their clients to their servers and services. So whenever the legitimate application users hit the legitimate application and it referenced these S3 records that were orphaned, it would direct the clients to the attacker's servers. And so we still see quite a bit of this. And also sensitive information in GitHub. And I see passwords in like shell history in GitHub on images. I see a lot of malware. So, it's amazing that people are not sanitizing these images that they're running their critical applications on. So why do these problems exist? Lack of visibility, as we said, lack of context is really what's important. So lack of context, if you do not have context, you cannot have risk prioritization. If I have 10 high-risk vulnerabilities, but only one of them is exposed to the internet, which one do I prioritize, right? So I need to have context, which one's exposed, to know what to prioritize. Without it, you have agent fatigue, right? I work for Carbon Black. We generate a lot of good signal, but that's a lot of good signal. And you can really get lost in some of that. And so, it takes a long time to tune some of these in-memory security tools, and they create a lot of false positives. You also have a lack of resources and silos. So this is why our existing tool sets aren't helping us address this. So if we go and we talk about context and why context is important. So I've got a couple of different attack scenarios here. One is an attacker is attacking, trying to perform a ransomware attack against an S3 bucket through either deleting it or, just deleting it in this option. So as a protector, you have to look at several different elements within this. You've got to look at these identities. You've got to understand what roles, groups, users are involved. This is all context. What the S3, what S3 buckets are involved? Are there any KMS buckets involved? What is the exposure and mitigation? So how is this exposed? What mitigations are in place, right? And then they have to have the permissions. Now, in this scenario, we have an attacker coming in and MFA delete, object locking, and bucket versioning are not enabled. So in this case, our Orca system is going to consider this an imminent compromise because there are no controls or mitigations that are in place to stop this attack from happening. However, if we sense that you have MFA enabled, bucket versioning enabled, we're going to call this a hazardous, right? It's not, there's not a viable attack vector to this, or there's not a viable attack vector to capture this bucket. And so the bottom one is simply the same thing. You've got to look at several different aspects of the environment. How are we doing time?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Quickly. So here's another example about prioritization. And so you've got 3 different versions of web server here, right? Windows, Linux, 2 Linux ones in different locations, different purposes, right? But they all have the same high risk vulnerability on them. So how do we use context to figure out how to prioritize these alerts? So it all comes down to this last piece, right? Is it an internet facing service? Yeah, so if we go through all these checks and it's finally get to this check, if it's an internet facing service and the machine is on, it's imminent compromise. However, if it's not an imminent or internet facing service, right, and it's not off, it's only hazardous. Does that make sense to you guys? Is that what context and prioritization are? And then, of course, this one, if the machine's off, it's just informational. So what's missing? Why is context missing? So the lift and shift approach really isn't working. It hasn't worked well. And that's because of the tools we've had. CSPMs can only tell us how our clouds are misconfigured. CWPP solutions will only tell us how our workloads are misconfigured, right? The vulnerability scanners, they just, if they give us any prioritization at all, it's something maybe we've tagged with it, or if they're going off of some kind of CVSS score, but usually they're not going to sense where they sit within the environment and then automatically tag themselves as internet facing if they sense that. And then, so, you know, you've got all these different silos and all these different products. And the problem is they're not stitched together. There's no unified data model. There's no coherent workflows. And so that's really the reason why, you know, context is missing from our existing sets, is because we've got the tools to gather the information. There's just not unified and integrated. So some of the best practices for preventing these cloud, you know, misconfigurations, you need that 100% visibility. Agent-based or per asset integrated solutions are, you know, they're okay, but what we typically see is 60 to 80% of the environment is left uncovered. And that inevitably will be the target that the attacker locks in on. The next thing we want to do is try to get in as much context and prioritization into your signal as possible, so that you have a chance to spot what really matters and address those things that really matter. Next, take advantage of automation as much as possible, right? Automate your workflows. If you see a certain type of alert, automate, you know, the first 2 or 3 steps of that. Try to use that automation as much as possible. Now, that's also tricky in the cloud because, you know, you could have some security guy out there said, oh, this is misconfiguration, I'll go and change this. And they make a change and they don't check in with the DevOps team, and then they just blow something away and, you know, thinking they've done a great job, and, you know, there's no coordination. So we really like to have kind of a great wall of China between security or from detection and auto remediation in the cloud. You really need to think out those auto remediation orchestration scenarios. And then, of course, you need to be able to automate compliance, right? Compliance is a piece of our lives. It's what drives our budgets in many cases. But we need to get to a point where we're not spending a lot of time and effort on the overhead and the administrative burdens of audits. And so real quickly, this is a quick couple slides on Orca, as we said earlier. You've got 2 web servers with the same CVE, except in this top scenario, This one is exposed, got internet facing service, it's got access to an EC2 with a database with PII in it. In this case, that first scenario, that's an imminent compromise. That second scenario is just hazardous because it's not externally exposed and it has no lateral movement capabilities to any really sensitive repositories. So how does all this work? First thing we do is we read the cloud service provider APIs, discover all the assets, all the users, the VMs, Kubernetes, containers, network, ACLs, security groups. We understand what's in the environment. Anything that's got underlying block storage, we're going to create a snapshot of that block storage. We're going to mount that snapshot up on an ephemeral host that lives in our account. And we're going to start that data plane scan, right? What's the OS? What vulnerabilities are on the OS? What vulnerabilities are on the apps? Do we see any easy to guess passwords? Do we see any brute force attempts? Do we have any malware on there? And we're doing beyond, since we're on a side scanning device, typically your workload antivirus, if it's anything, is going to be signature-based detection, and that's it. Since we are on the side scanning, we can do a lot more detection or run a lot more heuristic analysis on those executables and those libraries, looking for those 0 days. And I can tell you, quite often I find malware in environments where they think they have antivirus installed. And all of this, so you have these two pieces of data, all of this gets sent up to our context map and prioritized. And so basically what you have is a single platform, single pane of glass, that is a cloud-based platform that covers several areas of risk across multiple cloud providers and across various deployment methods or types. One thing I want to say, since we are in DC, and Lewis is my FedRAMP guy. Where you at, Lewis? You want to say something about this?
Sure. So we are committed to the architect process, building out our backend environment in AWS. We're hoping to have everything wrapped up by the end of this year. We're targeting moderate phase 1. So we'll hopefully we'll have this available. This is available. We'll have it available to you accredited very soon.
Thank you, Lewis. We're really excited about that. So life after Orca, right? The idea here is you have multiple tools that are accomplishing these items. We want to turn, we want to give you the opportunity to consolidate those tools into a single platform that is agentless, has no gaps in coverage, does not cause friction with your DevOps team. And it gives you that attacker's view, right? Where is my weak point? Not what is my most important edge asset. What is the weak point in my environment? Because that's what the attacker is going to find. And we're going to automatically deprioritize 99.9% of alerts. And that'll help with that agent fatigue. And we also have out-of-the-box evidence for auditors, where we have compliance frameworks that we run all the controls over and show you how your systems reconcile against, or how your cloud environment reconciles against the stated framework, maybe ISO 27001 or NIST 853, high trust HIPAA. And that's it. Any questions, guys? I'm sorry I flew through that.
We've got about 5 minutes for questions before we move on to the next speaker.
So you can take a snapshot of an instance and then pull it over to a different account. I can see certain customers being not happy about that.
Yeah, no, and they're not, right? So that's the kind of the default, right? The commercial account that doesn't care. We use our account if it is they do care. We have them create their own account that mimics that scanner. So you're not giving us the role that allows us to do the snapshots and scans. We're creating an account that you own that does that. Now you're still sending all the metadata up to us for the context map, but the scanning is not happening outside of your environment. Now we also now have, I think George can talk about this. We can deliver the entire solution in a box, right, to run in your environment. So that's coming too, and that's pretty cool. Yep.
This sounds like a pretty snapshot of type scan. How do you do continuous?
So you've got to look at what triggers you have, right? So CloudTrail logs, if you see an asset show up, and you can automatically create the snapshot and then scan that device as it comes out. We are not real time, we are runtime. And we think it's important to ensure that we have full visibility and contextualized prioritization rather than a lot of signal that may or may not make sense. We'll take that time hit because, you know, we build these $1 million homes, we spend $250,000 putting in cameras, alarm systems, and all these kinds of things. But when we leave the windows unlocked, we leave the doors unlocked, we leave the keys underneath the mat. In the cloud, we may not even know where our doors and windows are, right? So, you know, it's really important to understand to protect, you know, the edge and understand, you know, where those weak points are in your environment. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Patrick.
Thanks so much, Zac.
Thank you.
Hand off to Patrick. I actually have a, Zac, do you mind stopping your screen share?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's me. I am, yeah, I'm just gonna switch over.
Yep. Make sure I wasn't sharing anymore. Sorry.
So people on the Zoom are seeing this, but people in the room are not. Just want to take a sec to introduce Pat Ryan, Cloud Practice Lead at Evans and Chambers Technology. And I'm sure that'll come up in just a moment.
Should I share the screen?
Probably in just a second. But well, with the Zoom.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Both of them in.
Yeah. And Patrick's going to be talking about improved management of IAM resources via CDK. And the CDK stands for
Cloud Development Kit.
the Cloud
I
Development Kit.
apologize for not expanding that out.
No, that's okay. It's like a newer, like it's the new SDK, right? It's
Kind of, I'll talk a little bit. I realize I didn't give a whole lot of context there, but I'll try to fill that in.
okay, fantastic. And I'm sure for like anybody in the room who has had to deal with either lots of IAM resources, and I'll define lots as anything above, let's say like 5 groups and 10 policies, it becomes very, very quickly a royal nightmare, to put it mildly. And so I'm sure that we will all benefit from hearing about better ways to take care of that. Yeah, I remember years ago, there was, if anybody's in the DC area, tech Slack, there was a conversation in there that I screenshotted a couple of years back. And somebody said, every time I have to deal with IAM at scale, it makes me want to tear every hair off of my head. So, you know, it's extremely painful.
I might have said that.
Yeah, it might have been.
It might have been me.
It might have been. I don't know. I can look for it.
That's why they leave it wide open.
Yeah, but I'm sure we will all benefit from hearing what Pat has to share with us today. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share, and you should fire yours up so it shows up here as well.
Awesome. Share screen. Desktop, share.
All right, sweet.
Cool.
Take it away, good
There
sir.
we go. Chat. Whoa, why is it not blowing up? I hate computers. Well, that's not the most exciting slides, but then we'll talk through. So thanks, everyone. Very good handout. Thanks for putting in all the notes about how hard it is to manage IAM roles and all the risks therein. You think we planned that. So let's go ahead. Yeah, I realized I kind of leapt into this, put these slides together, didn't expand a whole lot of like the acronyms and such. So, but I figured since I was at the AWS security meetup, I didn't need to explain what the IAM is and what it's for. It's identity and access management. It's how all access is controlled and stuff talking to each other in AWS. CDK is the cloud development kit. So if you have any experience with AWS, you likely dealt with cloud formation. So in general, sort of a fundamental best practice in almost any kind of cloud is if you're going to deploy anything real, you're going to put it in some kind of infrastructure as code solution. In the case of AWS, that is CloudFormation. CloudFormation is all in YAML and JSON based, so it's all it's not a programming language. It's static. So there are a lot of inherent limitations in that tool. So over the years, as those creeps have been more and more hard to work around, a couple of years ago, someone at Amazon came up with the Cloud Development Kit, which is basically deep in its inside it's TypeScript, but it's a software development kit for writing programs in one of, I think, 5 different languages. When you run that program, what you end up with is one or several CloudFormation templates, which actually deploy your solution. But you have all the normal things you can do in a program that you can't do in something like YAML. So you can do little loops and do things like calling out to the Amazon APIs to go get stuff. So it's and makes it way better. So I started getting into that. I kind of dipped my toes into it last fall, and then back in January, I got a positive COVID test. That was fun. So no symptoms, but I was kind of locked in my guest room / office at home for 10 days or so. And I wanted to get more in. I want to learn more about EventBridge because I had a specific use case I was trying to work through. And sort of then as a side effect, sort of the side gig became one of the main gigs that learned some better ways to create IAM roles and also sort of what CDK does out of the box in terms of IAM. So the basic use case, this is the actual thing I scrawled literally on some piece of paper in my office, where I have some scenarios where data is processed for various reasons, and some of these files, they're largely stored in S3, have to get sent to some other API to go do some other stuff. It's for us, it's an endpoint. It's not in Amazon, I don't think. It's an API that generally works fine, but occasionally fails. It gets throttled, or you might have stale keys or something. And so I wanted, so I had a solution that was provided to me by the people who built this API, a template around. They use S3, SNS, SQS, all sort of the normal things you use. And so the way you then use this API is you dump your file into a bucket. It would kick off a S3 bucket notification to kick off a chain of events, the result of which it would hit the API or try to hit it. And then if it failed for one of various reasons, it would retry it every minute or two until it either got through, or if it failed after an hour, however long, it would be in a failure queue. That worked, still worked. The thing I didn't like about it is that essentially it ran everything through a queue, and all the API calls were all running off of a what used to be called a Cloud Watcher rule is now an EventBridge rule. So for old Unix hackers, that's just a cron job. So you basically think of a cron job that runs every minute, and you can't really make it go any more frequent than that. So the net effect of all this, all the API calls, even if everything's working perfectly, you're on average adding 30 seconds or so of latency while things are waiting, just until the next time the cron job fires off. And that just kind of irritated me. So it's like, I want to be able to call this thing, try it right away, and then only if that fails, then put it in some kind of retry loop. So that's what is scrawled here in my bad handwriting. So I hate drawing tools, so that's why I just did it and scanned it in. So IAM roles. So I'm not going to try and summarize the volumes of documentation about what IAM does, but largely the things we care about are instances, Lambda functions, and roles that human beings can assume. Those are all roles are attached to those. A role is just a bucket of policies, essentially. A policy by itself doesn't do much in the context of a role. You also have resource-specific policies where an object such as a Lambda function will have a policy attached that controls who can do what, who can call a function and under what conditions. So there's lots of places where you've got to handle the policies going both ways to get it right and work. FedBridge, SNSUS, and then S3 then has bucket policies that control that if you have attached a bucket policy, it controls who can perform what actions against that bucket. So I have some cases where I have like some very special data, and I only want certain roles to be able to access that data. And if you're not in one of those roles, you can't see it. So these are anyway. So the syntax under the covers is all the same. It's all IAM rules and policies. So couple best practices that are they're often not followed. So you get a lot of rules and policies out of the box from Amazon. Many of them are just fine, many of the policies especially. However, you can create your own, which is a better thing to do. Generally, for a production application, you don't want to just be using a role that was provided by Amazon because they generally have very wide open permissions. They don't restrict what actions or the resources that you're gonna run those actions against. You should avoid those. So the best practice is to create the roles and the policies at the same time as you're actually creating those resources. So if you run the same template, twice, you're going to get a whole separate set of roles and policies. I deny all by default. That's a core thing that Amazon does by default. If you don't add a role or policy, then your instance can't do anything. So I think I've said the same thing several different ways here. So let me proceed here. So in old-fashioned cloud formation, this is kind of what it looks like. That's just a small picture of one role. That's the natural role I had to create for something. So Jeremy said that people will cry when they have to deal with cloud formation, or they have to deal with creating roles and policies in cloud formation because this is what it looks like. So there's that, and there's also there's a lot of areas where if you do this wrong, it'll deploy, and then stuff just won't talk to each other in the cloud, and you'll have no error log, or evidence why can't thing A talk to thing B, and it's just you got nothing. So it's I think a flaw that I wish Amazon would fix somehow, or at least be able to turn on some flag that says, oh, by the way, you tried to call your Lambda function. You can't because the thing trying to call it didn't have the right permission. Can maybe log that somewhere? It would be kind of useful. So anyway, so easy to get these wrong. And you can see here, my note to myself, I had this policy that was attached to a Lambda function, I believe. Yeah, role attachment function, and it's the Lambda execute. And then here, apparently this function needed access to S3. So here I have action. So I'm going to give you access to all S3 actions and access to all of the items in that bucket. And I said, I have a comment here. I should probably restrict this. So this means saying, oh, by the way, this is a really bad thing to do. It's like I'm giving this function way too much access. That's the way to not do it. So let's keep going. Okay. In Cloud Development Kit, you can still create your roles and policies sort of explicitly. You'll see a bit of code that'll show you how to do that. What's nice is that CDK does a lot of this management kind of behind the scenes for you, so you don't have to think about it. And for the most part, that's good. I mean, I kind of get worried when things happen by magic. In this case, I'm okay with a certain amount of magic things happening because they make sense. It's like I should have done in the first place, but it did. It does solve a lot of those cases where thing A can't talk to thing B, and it's not apparent why. So let's keep going. So this, so it's just like I said, I'm not good at graphics, so I'll show you a little bit of code here, and I'll probably move the cursor around here on the screen for the people who are online. I got a few. All right. So anyway, so first half of that is just a basic Lambda function. This is all in Python, by the way. So you can create this stuff in Python, TypeScript, I think JavaScript, Go. What am I missing? There's other things like five, there's at least 5.
It was experimental, I think.
Okay, I don't know. I just do in Python.
I remember the C++.
Why would you do that? That sounds like a terrible thing to do.
So
Is that or a C#?
original website is C++.
Okay.
90s.
All right. Anyway, so top half of that screen just defines a Lambda function. I've got some code. There is a event bridge rule here. So this is what this is doing is when an object is dumped into a bucket, and that bucket has the event bridge notification enabled. When an object appears in that is when a put object action happens against that bucket, it will fire off an event. This rule is designed to trigger off that event. So when the object appears with a certain prefix, you see the next to last line there where it targets, it will then call a particular Lambda function. So let's see if I do next slide or the next slide. So a couple things happen there that are important to notice is that if I was doing this in CloudFormation, this last line here where the event bridge system, when this event happens, what's called this function, there has to be a resource specific policy on the Lambda function that will let event bridge call it. And that's the kind of thing that's easy to forget. And then I missed a lot. So what's nice is I don't have to do that at all. This, the CDK is smart enough to say, oh, that when this kind of a situation happens, I have a Lambda function and someone needs to be able to call it. So, well, you probably want to grant permission to the event bridge system to invoke, to call the invoke function action in Lambda against that particular function. So I'll show you this in a little bit. Okay. Yeah, this is the one. Right. Oh, and also correspondingly, you then logically assume if you set up this rule, you want the Lambda function to be able to read what is in that bucket. And again, it's something if you don't do that, you can be your function might get called, but then you get an error that you didn't have the permission to access that bucket if the bucket policy isn't set up right and you haven't made it just wide open. So there we go. So this little bit of role here was added automatically. So it's allowing, let's see what's right one. This is, yeah, on the function, it was granted the permission to call these three S3 actions against this bucket. And I thought this is also one that I found by accident that I'd forgotten. I added in some code last week that I turned on bucket encryption on this bucket. And so didn't even think about it. I was looking at this literally yesterday. I think, wait, why is this KMS action on here? And I realized that again, if your bucket's encrypted, you've got bucket encryption is enabled with KMS, and like your Lambda needs to access something in that bucket, it needs access to the key that is encrypting the content in order to decrypt it. So CDK was smart enough to add the policy in here that grants this function the decrypt and describe key permissions for this one key. So not everything. So these are all very tightly scoped. This is one very tightly scoped policy.
Why is it adding stars at the?
I think there's a couple different actions that start with this. Like get object tagging. There's a handful. Again, there's not.
So it magically knows it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was really compulsive, I could. This is just what it came up with. I think I can constrain that if I really wanted. It's just a little more work for me, but I think I'm theorizing on the Amazon side that just by research that found that this will comprise the things that you need to be able to do. So, but I don't have any ability to to delete anything. I can't delete the bucket, I can't delete objects, I can't change permissions, I can't add tags. It just gives me sort of basic read access.
It's only to that one specific.
And it's only on this one bucket.
And subfolders that they get created.
Yes. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, you can get really specific with these, but this is like way better than what I normally would have done in the past. How am I doing my downtime? I've got good. All right. So this is another. I think I should do that one already. So this is another one where as a role that I created explicitly. This was for a Lambda function. This is the function. There's a role that's attached to the function that is called when a new object appears. You've got access to the basic managed the built-in managed policies. So that just lets it write logs. And then this particular Lambda function, when it gets an object, I needed to give it permission to send an event on the default event bridge bus. And on this specific, that is the default bus, and it's super obvious, but it's allowed. But if I didn't have this, the Lambda function wouldn't have the ability to call. So this is the one where like there wasn't enough information for it to be able to figure that out magically. I had to actually tell it that. But again, if I had to do this in CloudFormation, it'd probably be 3 or 4 times as many lines of YAML to do the exact same thing. Let me see. And let me see, I think I showed you guys that one already. All right, so this is another, and I'm kind of jumping around here a bit. But this was the resource specific function that was attached to the Lambda function. And this, I didn't do this at all. This was created for me when I said I want the I wanted the event bridge rule to be allowed to invoke this function. So all that is required in order for that to happen. And that happened, again, this is one that I would have to write. So I have 0 lines of code to do this now, whereas I have to write all that in YAML or JSON and CloudFormation to do the same thing. All right, let me. Okay. Bucket access. So bucket policy, again, this is, you don't have to have a bucket policy, but again, for any kind of real production system, it is a best practice to have a policy on the bucket that indicates who's allowed to talk to it and to do, excuse me, to do what with it. What's nice about the way it works in CDK, for the most part, you don't have to create the policy yourself. You just indicate that I want this principal to, I want to grant to a particular principal access to the bucket. And you can indicate whether it's like, well, you can give it like read or write, or if you want to be really specific about the exact policies, you can do that as well. But again, it's a lot shorter. You're talking like 1 line of code instead of 20 lines of YAML. All right. Okay. Permissions boundaries. So this is a little bit of a in the weeds topic, but the particular kinds of DoD and Intel customers that I deal with do actually use these. So it's essentially a way to provide an outermost boundary of that's just a policy that's attached to a role. So what will happen is usually if you have an agency where the cloud is managed by a central admin team of some sort, and they set up your account for you, they will set up their agency a specific boundary policy, and then you can create your roles and policy. You can create roles as long as you attach the correct boundary policy to it. So you then can't exceed. So even if you write S3 star or whatever you want in your policies, when the policy is actually valued at runtime, it can't go beyond what's in the boundary policy. That's also one where if you actually wanted to use one of these in CloudFormation, you would have to attach it in every single role you define. What's nice is you can do this in one line of code in YAML, in CDK. There's a tool called Aspects in CDK that will let you make those sort of global changes. What's also nice is there are, with CDK, there are certain kinds of resources which have as a side effect, it'll create some special purpose roles that you didn't even know were there. And it'll add the boundary policy even to the ones that you did ask it to create. So super handy. And again, let's sort of drag the agency into the future and do it much more securely. Yes.
Yeah, question, how do you specify the permission boundaries? Like, how do you pass those to the CDK to say, hey, like, this is what my permission boundary is? Or is it like automatically account constrained? Or?
No, it's not. It's, well, the boundary policy itself is provided by the agency. It's something they've set in your account.
Okay.
Usually given some kind of fixed name,
Okay.
like agency boundary policy, whatever. And so, and
Like
the,
inherited from an SDP or something?
it's, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, I see it, I mean, how they deploy it, I don't know. It's per account. I don't think they're fancy enough to use AWS organizations.
Okay.
I just know I have a policy.
Okay.
It sounds similar though.
They are, SCPs kind of came out after about.
Did they?
But it is literally just, I'll show you real quick. Let's see.
So basically you just speak to CDK, the YAML file or the
Yep.
JSON file that creates the boundary.
I'll make that a little bigger. Yeah, so there's code here that just that is only checking to see whether or not I've added a policy in the CDK JSON file. But this line of code here is the IAM permission boundary of self-applied policy. That's the magic line. That does everything.
But the boundary policy does get an ARN that just refers
Yes,
to, and then-
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Then normally they will have set up the permission, like for your whatever role that you are given to assume when you're logged in the console or doing CloudFormation, they've set up the permissions on like the create role and attach role or create and update role actions so that you can only do that if you add that policy to it. Otherwise, it'll fail.
So do they read roles that don't have the policy, they automatically don't have the service?
It varies. I don't know. You don't usually delete them. They may constrain what roles you can actually make use of. Yeah, I support a couple different agencies and I'm not super consistent about how they do it.
So what takes precedence? The boundary policy or the permission boundary or the
SCP.
SCP?
Nice. Amazon has a nice chart below that shows the inheritance of all the stuff. I mean, anytime you need to know that, go look at the chart.
I haven't looked for that code. I had the code in the slide. I forgot I pasted that exact code in the slide.
SCP, like, the
All right. Yeah, that was, I mean, I had put the slides together and showing what the event bridge stuff does is like, I found not as interesting as just showing what all the IAM stuff does. That was pretty cool. That's what I enjoyed. So I'm not gonna like demo this because it's not all that exciting, but I will show you. So here's my Amazon console a second ago. Yeah, so you see here, this is a bunch. Go back Chrome. Why is Chrome not coming up? There we go, but that's the wrong Chrome page.
So I think there was an interesting distinction that he made earlier that he kind of hit on while I was finding this. I'll stop talking.
Yep, no, yeah, go ahead. Please talk while I'm trying to find the right page.
So, we often see people permissions. So they'll be like, oh, I've created this Lambda function and I'm going to give the permissions, pass the permissions to the user that's calling the Lambda function, right? And so that's problematic because now that user has probably more permissions than they need, right? So what we've seen people do is like you said earlier, let's move those permissions down to the Lambda function. And then let's let the user access.
There we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, this is what I wanted to show. Yeah, so this is just a quick view in CloudFormation. I'm sorry, in IAM of the roles I created when I deployed this one template. Now, in the olden days, I probably would have created one role that's like the Lambda role. That was like access S3 star and whatever else that I wanted. So this makes it way easier to just kind of to actually do the right thing. So like have a one role per Lambda function. So you only give it the access rights for the one thing it needs to be able to do. And it's pretty nice.
There's 30 different functions that are part of your upload application or whatever. It's called.
I've got a couple, there's, I think, a couple of these. This one's a weird side effect one that was created. I've got like this one and this. But like I said, it'll occasionally create little Lambda functions and roles sort of behind the scenes that do other stuff. They're largely functions and roles that are created behind the scenes to do the stuff that CloudFormation couldn't do for you.
Okay.
So I don't even think about it, just there. So there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 6 actual Lambda functions I wrote.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So like all of that, I mean, the actual code of the Lambda functions is like a cumulative 180 lines of code, and that's just sparsely documented. But like I said, I was able to get a lot done with a very small amount of code. So yeah, I think that's the core of it. Anything else here I wanted to show you guys?
Yeah, I looked it up. It's C#. You're right. Not C++.
See, yeah, that didn't sound right.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm like, wow, that would be hardcore. So anyway, that's my last slide. So all the code that I just talked about is there on GitHub. That is the company that I work for. I'm the cloud practice lead at Evans Chambers. Small, I think I mentioned at the beginning, small DoD and Intel focused company headquartered in downtown Washington in Shaw. LinkedIn and Twitter. Not that I Twitter a whole lot or put a lot on LinkedIn, but other than I think coming here, I think I put on LinkedIn. That's questions. Any other questions? That's all that I had. Okay, you guys can go.
So what is the number
Yes.
one use case for your program?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
oh, I mean for the actual
For the uploader. I mean,
the upload is certainly, yeah, it's if you have data that you need to send to an API, and the API is not like guaranteed to be always there. Like, and it's something, and if it's something that you just want to retry it.
Okay.
If for some reason it's not available or it's throttled or something like that. And so you want to queue it up and just have it automatically a retry until it gets through.
Okay. Instead of just sitting and forget.
Yeah, exactly.
SQS for data you're trying to send to an API.
Yes, kind of, yeah. Because I wanted to go like try real fast first and then go to SQS. Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple, I have two actual customer scenarios that I needed this for. That I am using it for. Like I said, it was like, learning all the stuff about IAM and CDK was a nice added benefit of going through and figuring how this would work.
What would you say is the main benefit of CDK, like overall? I mean, it sounds, because you mentioned a couple of things, and certainly like
Sure.
one of them that I heard is just like way less code to write.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, so as a programmer, I like using it. Definitely, there's some, I think its biggest benefit is like, or benefits are things you can't do easily in CloudFormation. Like if you want a solution to deploy to, n number of availability zones, 1 to 6 or whatever. Like having that kind of, like, you can't just, with a very few cases, that's hard to do, say, put in n or x or list the zones you want to deploy to, and then have it do all the rights, do the same thing in all the availability zones. That's almost impossible in CloudFormation, whereas it's really easy in CDK. Because basically each time you want to deploy in a different region, you're generating a new set of templates. So it's not what lives is the code you wrote in the script, not the templates themselves. They're kind of ephemeral. That's a big one. I mean, it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword like that. I think there's like a certain class of DevOps people who were really good at cloud formation. But maybe we're not programmers or didn't like programming. So if like CDK becomes the dominant way you deploy solutions, then those people are going to have to learn how to code.
I think kind of debugging, like, I'm sure you ran into issues.
Well, yeah, well, that, yeah, you know, and you raise a good point that just sort of ancillary to that, with cloud formation, although it's kind of pain to use, it's fixed. There's not too many fancy things you can do with it. So, you know, if you've been in this business a long time, so you always want to try and think about the person who's going to maintain this thing in the future. And so, you know, the downside then, if we're all just writing code to do this, so all the possible sins you can commit as a programmer, you're then writing is that you're writing code that's going to generate cloud formation. If you write crappy code or you don't document it well, then the next person who has to maintain it may have some pain.
Well, I kind of meant like it ultimately generates cloud formation, but at some point, I would imagine in a debugging process, you still have to look at the generated cloud formation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you can't just like, I don't know cloud formation, I don't care. You still have to know some.
Yeah, it kind of, I mean, I don't generally look at the cloud formation that was generated, you know.
And when not even when there's a problem.
I mean, I probably have, yeah, if there's a problem, like it's not generating the thing that I think it should do. But for the most part, if you ask it to deploy something, you know, nonsensical,
Yeah.
the script to generate this template will fail for some reason.
Before the deployment.
It'll fail before you get that far. Yeah. Yeah. Like if you've hard coded, you know, an incorrect bucket name, it's not going to know that until you deploy it. You know. Yeah, but I think, like I said, you know, as a programmer and as someone who writes Python, I think it's great. But yeah, it's something you have to, you know, it's with great power comes great responsibility, as with most things. Those things are this, here's more rope to hang yourself on. So, anyway, I did this because after I signed up for this, then I got accepted to talk for 20 minutes at CDK day. So I got all the stuff I just said to you guys in the last half hour, I've got to get into like crisp, like 18 minutes and record it. So this is good practice. All right. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you all for coming out. Eat pizza.
Yes, please.
Tonight, and also to all of you for coming out, to our sponsors for hosting, for sponsoring, for providing pizza and drinks and all that good stuff. Christina for inviting the DevOps DC folks to join us. How many people came from the DevOps DC group? Sweet. Awesome. Like a third of people.
And online.
Yeah, and online as well. Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're gonna go ahead and like end the recording, stop the stream. We will have this uploaded to YouTube in the next like day or two. And then we'll send a message out to the meetup groups, everybody who's in the groups, you know, with the link so they can go watch the video